difficulties, family, I can't remember what the title of it all was, and I forgot to put up the posters or look at it. So, but anyway, we're talking about family crises, family issues, things like that. And today we're continuing that as we're going to look at Isaac and Rebekah and the dysfunction that was in their family. So if you want to open up your Bibles this morning to Genesis chapter 25, we'll be a couple verses there. Then we're also going to be in Genesis chapter 27 as we look at this. And as we get ready to get started, though, what are some areas of life where you definitely have favorites? Okay, sweet tea or unsweet? Unsweet. Okay, I'm definitely like sweet tea better, but I have to drink unsweet. Right? Mountains or beach vacation? I don't care, just take me somewhere, right? Let me get away somewhere. I don't care where it is, just get me somewhere. Sports teams.
Chiefs.
Got my Patrick Mahomes. I got my Patrick Mahomes over here. Yeah. Okay. Any Raiders fans in the room? Any chance? Oh, good. I'm really glad we didn't have to kick anybody out. I'm glad we didn't have to be like, okay, I'm sorry, you can't be in here no more. Oh, you're pointing at somebody. But no, I'm kidding about that. It's crazy because when we were kids, my brother was a Raiders fan for some unknown reason. I don't know why. He just was. And even it's just strange. It's weird why people choose to be fans of certain teams. My daughter Kayla, for whatever reason, is a Bears fan. I don't get it. I don't understand it. It's not like they've ever even been good in her entire lifetime. She just likes Bears. And so that's her team. And she really likes them. And she follows them pretty closely. And I was like, okay, whatever. But there's all different things. And there's all different areas of life where having a favorite isn't a bad thing. You know what I mean? It's okay. It's okay to have to prefer one thing over another thing and things like that. But when it comes to families and family relationships, specifically what we're looking at today, there isn't any room for favoritism. Okay. And that's what our lesson is going to be about today, is love should be without favoritism within the family. And so that's what we're going to talk about here this morning, and we'll get into this a little bit more. And I just want to invite you guys to jump in, ask your questions. There's going to be certain things that I won't bring up. Feel free to, because this is a lesson that it's kind of a hard one for me a little bit just to even get my head around. Because there's no good examples. I'll just be honest with you. There's nothing redeeming in any of these in this story. It's just bad example after bad example, right? And so almost this lesson is just a lesson of don't do this. But anyway, we'll maybe put a twist on it at the end. But anyway, so somebody read for me Genesis 25 verses 24 through 28, and we'll begin our discussion.
When her time came to give birth, there were indeed twins in her womb. The first one came out red-looking, covered with hair like a fur coat, and they named him Esau. After this, his brother came out, grasping Esau's heel with his hand, so he was named Jacob. Isaac was 36 years old when they were born. When the boys grew up, Esau became an expert hunter, an outdoorsman, but Jacob was a quiet man who stayed at home. Isaac loved Esau because he had a taste for wild game, but Rebekah loved Jacob.
Okay. So, inter-family dysfunction, right? Just for a little bit of, well, I won't go into too much of the background, but now let's just jump into it. You guys know this. You guys know the story, I'm sure. So, let me just start off with this. I'm really glad that we don't name people by what they look at when they're born anymore. Okay? Because literally Esau means hairy. Yeah. Oh, this one's hairy. We'll name him Esau. So, and or red. It literally means red, hairy. There's even some indications later on that he is kind of known by that name, Red. That kind of becomes his nickname. So I'm really glad we don't do that anymore, because if we did, every kid would just be squishy. You know, I mean, I don't know. You know. But, you know, there's no such thing as an ugly baby. You know, they're all cute. But I think Esau was probably not very attractive. You know, I mean, doesn't sound very attractive. But nevertheless, very, very different. Glad we don't do that anymore. But here we have these two boys that they're both born. We've had a difficult time conceiving. We've had to wait a long time for these children to be born. And when they're born, she's actually going to have twins. And all this is going to happen. Let me just ask you this. For those of you that are parents or grandparents, how different are your children?
Night and day.
Oh, yeah. I have 3. 2 are similar, and then one he's just,
Completely different.
Yeah.
Right? That's the way it is, right? All of our kids, I mean, you'd think they would be very, very similar, but man, they are all different, right? They all have different personalities. They're all just different. How many of you have had kids that were, let me put it this way, that were easy to discipline and raise, and at the same time had ones that were very, very difficult, and the same hands all stayed up, right? Right? And so, even as we begin this, I just want to point you to the idea that, and even take it back. You all were children at one time, right? And so you kind of all experienced this. And so, even as we're going to talk about favorites and not have it showing favoritism, that doesn't mean that our children don't have different needs. Okay? It doesn't mean that they get treated completely the same, right? None of my kids are in here today, so I can talk openly about them, right? My oldest daughter was very difficult. You know, she was like her mother, very stubborn.
You're on film.
Oh man.
You're on film.
She never watches. She doesn't even know where to find it. So I'm good. But no.
Somebody might help her out.
Okay, so she gets it from both of us. But she was very stubborn, very difficult. She was the type that you would discipline and correct, and she was just like, "Arr." You know what I mean? Even in the midst of all of it. Her younger sister, if you looked at her cross, she'd melt. You know what I mean? And so, still very, it doesn't mean that but they both got the same correction, but it took a different type of correction for each one, right? So, we're not saying anything along that line, but favoritism, we have to be careful even in that. It would have been very, very easy for me, or even for me and my wife, to prefer the easy child, right? Because of that. And so you got to watch yourself. You got to guard yourself. And the thing about it is all of our kids are different. Some of our kids are easy. Some of our kids are hard. But you know what? Chances are those kids that are hard or a challenge or require that really tough discipline, God created them unique. Right? And later on, and the neat thing is later on in life, that has served her pretty well. Right? And the fact that she didn't just give in. You know what I mean? She waited a long time for her husband. You know? And different things like that. And so there's different things, different areas where that can happen. But it's easy and it's natural to gravitate toward people, you know what I mean, that are similar to us, or people that have a shared interest to us. This is something that we have to even watch out for, even in the church, is that, it's okay for us to have people that we're closer to because of similar interests, but we got to be careful that we don't show favoritism in that we just prefer to be around, you know what I mean, that we disclude, what am I trying to say?
We don't alienate the others.
Yeah, that we don't alienate people, that we don't, you know what I mean, accept people, that we don't love, show everyone love equally, and all that type of thing. So this is what happens. And immediately we see this favoritism start to happen. Why does Isaac prefer Esau? Simple. Why? Why does he like him better?
He hunts and he likes the taste of meat.
Yeah, you know what? He's a man's man. Right? I mean, yeah, the passage says that he's an outdoorsman, right? He likes to hunt, and Isaac likes that. You know what I mean? And he prefers that. Why does Rebecca prefer Jacob?
He's a homebody.
Because he's a homebody? Yeah, it says that he prefers to stay at home. Or probably a better way of looking at that is he prefers to stay closer to the camp.
He's a farmer.
Huh?
He's a farmer.
He's a farmer.
That's what.
Yeah, so even though that it says that he prefers to stay at home, don't get the idea necessarily that he just is an inside guy, because we're going to see later in his life that he's very much an agricultural guy, right? He knows his livestock, right? And the family business is shepherding, you know what I mean? Herds, flocks, all that type of stuff. So in a way, I mean, I don't want to differentiate. I mean, he's a man's man too, right? But they're just different. We're just seeing differences in between the two, right? And so, but we see this favoritism begin. And I don't know. I mean, there might even be a possibility that they both just favored the other one because they saw the favoritism that the other had for the other one. It could be that Rebecca just favored Jacob because she saw the way that Isaac treated Esau, right? Mm-hmm. Or vice versa. We don't know all of the details, but we do see this this favoritism kind of on display. What are the consequences when parents show favoritism?
A lot of times it makes the kids resent one another.
Okay.
If you'll read this later, Jacob tricks his brother. If my brother came and asked me for soup, I'd just give you soup. I'm not going to go to my brother and say, okay, you give me this, this, and this, and I'll give you some soup. So there had to be some kind of resentment between the two brothers.
Right. And I think you see that. I think it's a great point. I think that the dysfunction in their relationship actually starts in the dysfunction in their parenting, right? Of the two. So resentment can build up between siblings over this. What other consequences are there for favoritism, showing favoritism?
They feel entitled.
Okay.
Probably could have some jealousy too.
Okay. Yeah. It does. It breeds jealousy, right? Between the two. Anybody have any? How many of you were the favorite, by the way? I was for a while. Then my brother kind of rooted me out of that.
If you ask our kids, my kids will tell you my oldest son is the favorite. And they'll tell you why.
Why is that?
Because he got married, moved out, and gave us grandkids.
Oh,
The
well,
other
that's
two
all
were
good
tied for
reason.
second. We teased and told them the other two were tied for second, because they did both move out. We just
Yeah.
got the grandkids yet.
Yeah. How many of you were the opposite? How many of you were just not the favorite? Or how many of you just grew up in a perfect, idealistic family where there were no favorites?
I was Jan Brady, so
Who said they were Jan Brady?
the middle child.
Oh, you were the middle child.
You were the favorite.
And not the
Okay.
favorite.
I don't know, I was the oldest, so they worked me like a dog.
Yeah, the oldest. How many of you are the oldest, by the way? Okay, I got several oldest. I was the oldest. You know, us as the oldest, we kind of start out as the favorites, but we have the hardest job because we got to break in those parents.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We got to be the ones that kind of teach them how to be parents. A little bit, kind of break it in. It makes it easier for the ones that come later, right, Juliana? Yeah, because they're better. They've made all their mistakes with us, and stuff like that. But
I was the only girl.
only girl? Does that make a difference when there's an only boy or only girl in the family?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
I think it does.
I think it does. It can be hard. It can make a difference. Yep, for sure. For sure.
All my girls think that our son is the favorite. All my girls think that. He's not the favorite. But the girls all think that. They'll all say that.
Well, probably no. We'd have to get all the girls in here, right, to find out why they say that, right?
I just asked Selah to confirm it. Yeah, Creed's favorite.
Creed is the favorite.
Does he go hunting with you and things like that?
I don't go hunting, but he does now. He goes hunting.
See,
I'm not into hunting.
so
So,
yeah.
has anybody to the point where it had like a real negative impact on your life or relationships, favoritism, where it was really negative in a bad way?
Yeah, when my parents separated.
Your mom just got really interested. By it.
When my parents separated, and I was 15, my brothers assumed that because I was the baby, and they all came to me to see if I was okay, that it didn't impact me as much as it impacted them.
Yeah.
So, and yes, I was always, oh, you're the favorite, you have everything so easy, and that's not the case. I was the one that had to work the hardest. When it came to grades, my brothers got to pass 5 with C's and D's, and if I got below a B, I was in trouble, because they expected so much more of me.
That happens, right? And it can put strains on. It can put strains on relationships. I know my mom was one of 11 kids, and she was down toward the bottom, back. And but anyway, my Uncle Danny was the youngest, and he was by all means the favorite. And because of that, all the other brothers and sisters, they affected their relationship. Now they're all good, it's a good relationship. But, he was the one that stayed around. When your kids are when you have that many kids and they're that spread out, he's got nephews and nieces that are older than him, right? That's just the way it is. So, by the time he came along, over half of his brothers and sisters were married and out of the house and had their own families, and that type of thing. But I can remember the resentment because he stayed around. He helped Grandma. He took care of the house. He took care of the yard and everybody and all the other brothers and sisters. Like, he's just doing all that so he can inherit it all. Big deal. 20 acres and an old house that by the time my grandmother moved out of it, all we could do was burn it down. Right? And it's like, but those kind of things kind of get into a mindset. You know what I mean? And they can affect the way we think about one another. Another kind of example similar to that, it's not quite the same, it's not a family thing, but there was a neighbor family that lived not very far away from us that never had any children, and they had a farm, and not a big farm, but they had a small farm, and there was a guy in the neighborhood that took care of them their whole life. Went once a week over there and took care of their yard, once a week, went over there and took them to town to buy groceries, took them to every doctor's appointment. And you know what everybody in the neighborhood thought about him? And other members of their family thought about him? He's all in it for the money, right? And guess what? He did get a house and 40 acres, right? But do you know what would have happened if he hadn't have been there to do all that stuff? They would have ended up in a nursing home. And guess what would have been left for everybody else? Nothing. Because that would have taken everything. And so some of the children, nieces and nephews got something. You know what I mean? But it's funny how that affects our mindset and our relationship. And I'll admit it, I even kind of had negative thoughts toward him. You know what I mean? And then years later, with a little bit of time and a little bit of perspective, I'm like, he didn't get nothing for all the effort he put in.
Well,
You know what I mean? And the fact of the matter is, he did it just because he loved them. They were like parents to him that he didn't really have. And you just got to be, we got to be very, very careful, because any type of view like that, any type of view of favoritism really creates a potential for divisiveness, right? Even within a family. So somebody else had something they wanted to say or comment?
Steve, I'm reading into that relationship, but that example that you just shared is a relationship. And the Bible emphasizes our relationships. And Jacob had a relationship with his mother. Esau was a hunter. You don't talk when you're out hunting.
Right.
You're quiet. You know, and part of the relationship is communication. So Jacob kind of had a relationship advantage.
Yes.
And here that was a relationship that you just gave the example.
Right.
That was dependent upon. It was positive. Yeah.
Yeah.
How often do siblings, when a parent's pass away, go attack each other over the estate?
Right. Right. And it's so sad, right? It's such a shame, you know? And really that's what we're going to see kind of going forward in this lesson. Because we're going to jump from the time they were born to the time that Dad thinks he's going to die, which is in and of itself weird. I'll just say it's weird because, you know, Isaac's like, oh, I better do this before I die, and then he lives like another 50 years. You know what I mean? He lives long enough to see both of them, after they both went off estranged from each other, come back, right? And they're both there, you know what I mean? After all this stuff that they went through, that they didn't necessarily have to go through, but this is going to take them in a really bad direction. Okay, and so let's look at where it takes them. We're going to jump forward to chapter 27. Somebody read verses 5 and 10, 5 through 10.
Now Rebekah was listening to what Isaac said to his son Esau. So while Esau went to the field to hunt some game to bring in, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, listen, I heard your father talking to your brother Esau. He said, bring me some game and make a delicious meal for me to eat, so that I can bless you in the Lord's presence before I die. Now my son, listen to me and do what I tell you. Go to the flock and bring me 2 choice young goats, and I will make them a delicious meal for your father, the kind he loves. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies.
Okay, what in the world just happened?
Mother's favoritism wanted her favorite one to get the blessing.
Okay, yeah, and that's hard for us, right? Because as you mentioned earlier, we've already Esau's already sold his birthright. Okay, which in essence, in that day and time, meant that he would get a double portion of the estate or the inheritance, which was normal. But he's done that over a bowl of stew. But for a bowl of stew, and he just kind of develops a bad attitude about it all. You know, what good's it going to do me if I die of hunger? And it's like, really? And then it says that he resents his birthright. So there's that animosity that's kind of going on here between these two brothers, but it starts clear back there, I think, with that favoritism that we saw even from the time that they were born. And that favoritism is carrying over now, right? Because it's so bad that Rebecca thinks she has to manipulate her husband into giving a good blessing to her son, right? And the truth, and it's sad, because later on we're going to see Jacob bless all of his boys.
Well, Rebecca was having issues with Esau's wives.
Okay,
And
that's
they
a
made her
good
life
point.
miserable, so maybe she had other motives.
Okay, so that is a good point. That's a great point. Esau's married a woman that is not a Hittite woman, and she makes everybody's life miserable. Okay, so guys, be careful. Young men, be careful who you marry. Make sure they're a good fit for the family, Clayton. You're doing fine. You stay right on that. No, I shouldn't do that. You're in good shape over there. But you know what I mean. You got to be. But there's a point of strike there. What else may be motivating her? There's something else in there.
Well,
Go ahead.
back in 25, God told Rebecca that the older would serve the younger, and I think maybe she needs to help God along with it.
Yes. God has told Rebecca, even before the twins are born, she has told them that the older is going to serve the younger in this reverse deal. And in that, God is really saying that the promise is going to go forward with the younger through Jacob and not through Esau. And so, and I think, and maybe that has something to do with her motivating why she's kind of always favored him. Definitely, that could be a part of what's going on here.
So why is it that when God has a plan, we all feel like we have to put our finger on the scale? You know what I mean? Well, that's his plan, but I probably need to put my 2 cents worth in to make sure.
Yeah, we don't need to do that, do we? Well, and let's say, that's a hard one, right? That is a hard thing, right?
That's what she's doing, is putting her finger on the scale.
Right. It's a good way to put it. She thinks she needs to help God along a little bit. And we feel that way too sometimes. Okay? And there's nothing wrong with that idea, I guess. I mean, you guys correct me if I'm wrong, because I'm just thinking this through while I'm sitting here. But there's nothing wrong with that idea as long as we don't do anything immoral or unethical or against God's word. Right?
Exactly.
As long as it doesn't cause us to sin or that we don't sin in the process. But what do we see Rebecca do? The exact opposite of that. She deceives. She lies. And she encourages her son to do it. Right? Because, Jacob's going to object a little bit. You know what I mean? Y'all have had those kind of objections like, oh, Mom, I'm not really sure if you should do this or not, but hey, I'm all on board.
But doesn't he only object because he thinks, Mom, if he touches me, he's going to know I'm not Esau. I'm going to get caught.
Yeah. It is.
I think that's his only objection that you hear, see,
Yeah.
or read about.
But how does this deception, though, how does Rebecca's deception shape Jacob moving forward?
how to deceive.
He doesn't have a very good model for family relationships going forward, does he?
Oh, and later on, his father-in-law kind of does the same thing to him, doesn't he?
Yeah.
Gives
Yeah.
him the wrong girl.
Yep. Yep. So, honesty, it's vital, guys, in healthy family relationships. And so a couple points there, God didn't need any help, right?
Right.
God's promise was going to go forward the way God's promise was going to go forward. And it's not wrong to be like wanting to do our part to, but not if it's at the expense of sin or deception or lying or any other thing like that. Let's go ahead and read verses 11 through 13.
Jacob answered Rebekah his mother, "Look, my brother Esau is a hairy man, but I am a man of smooth skin. Suppose my father touches me, then I'll be revealed to him as a deceiver and bring a curse rather than a blessing on myself." His mother said to him, "Your curse be on me, my son. Just obey me and go get them for me."
What makes lying and deception so difficult to overcome?
Once you start, you have to keep going to keep everything.
Yeah, pile a lie on top of a lie.
Pretty soon it catches up with you.
And what's the ultimate outcome of all of this? Does anybody get what they want? I like this commentary here. It says, although the author of the narrative does not overly cast judgment on any one of the characters, and I think that's kind of interesting in and of itself. I think it's a good point to note that we're just kind of being told the story, and we're not really, no judgments really being cast on anyone, on Isaac, on Rebekah, on Jacob, on Esau. We're just kind of being told the story. Each one of them in some way is blameworthy. Each one of them played a part. And each son reaped his own reward. Isaac and Rebekah both die brokenhearted. Did Rebekah get what she wanted? Do you think she really... was she happy? We're not really told. But do you think she was happy with how this all plays out? Do you think that she was happy that she got separated from her favorite son for most of his adult life moving forward? Was that what she wanted? For him to have to go off and live in exile somewhere? Did Isaac get what he wanted? No. Does Esau get what he wants? Nobody gets what they want. Isaac and Rebekah both die brokenhearted. Esau lost his blessing, and Jacob has to go into exile. Nothing good came out of any of this. Right? And so that's just kind of where we're at the end of this story. And this isn't the end of that story, though, by the way. But how can we exemplify love without favoritism? In our family, in our church, in our relationships. I think just to sum it up, and like I said, I've kind of had a hard time getting my head around everything that's in this lesson because there's not a lot of good to draw out of it. But I think there are three major truths that come out of this study. And I think the first is simply playing favorites is out of place in the family. Rebecca and Isaac both had a favorite, and nothing good came out of it. So there's just no place for that in a family. Deception is out of place in the family. You know, Rebecca had a plan to deceive her husband, and Jacob agreed to join her in that plan. Nothing good came out of that. The third, encouraging others to sin is out of place in the family. Rebecca was guilty of negatively influencing Jacob, and apparently he didn't know how to resist it or how to overcome it, and nothing good came out of it. So think about those three items again. They are so unlike what godly people are to be like because they are so unlike God. Right? This is not our Heavenly Father. Right? God never shows has no favorites. There is no partiality with him, right? We see that over and over in New Testament letters. There is no partiality with him. He has no favorites. And in fact, if he ever had a favorite, he gave up that favorite so you could be his favorite.
Amen.
Right? The one that was worthy of being the favorite, he sacrificed so that he could draw you in and make you a part of his family. So there's no favoritism with God. And so whenever we show favoritism, what are we saying about people? And let's just take it even outside of our family relationships. Because even within our family relationships, we don't want to have favorites, right? That's not to say that they're all the same. That's not to say that they all need to be corrected or disciplined or treated exactly equal, right? But take it outside of that. What are we saying when we have favoritism within the church or even out in our community? Basically, we're saying that God didn't make everybody equal. Basically, we're saying that some people are better than other people, right? And when we show favoritism, James chapter 2 verse 4 says we are guilty of having evil thoughts, for they are not godly thoughts. Mm-hmm. Right? Go ahead. You're about to bust. Go ahead, brother.
I was just thinking of a good friend of mine who has since passed away. That him and his wife had kids before Lisa and I had kids. And I had a favorite of his 3 kids. And I was pestering him one day. His name's Sam. I said, Sam, which one of your kids is your favorite? He's like, really. He said something that has stuck with me ever since. He wasn't a believer at that time. He said, whichever one of them needs me. Ooh. And I'm thinking,
so that explains a lot why my brother supplanted me. Needy fellow.
But God, the Lord.
That's true.
He wants us to need Him.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. I like that thought. I'm glad you went ahead and shared that, even though Lisa rolled her eyes when I asked if you were about to bust. But I just wish everybody got to have my view. Well, some of you do. Somebody sit up here on the front. You get to have my view of the rest of the class. But there's no favoritism with God. And we need to be careful. We need to guard ourselves from that. Because this is an easy thing, right? Easy thing to slip into.
If you look at it, God knew all along how it was going to play out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He knew everything before it happened.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The other thing is the next item is God is never deceptive. Okay? He is true, he is honest, he is faithful, he is dependable, and he is reliable. What he says is right. What he promises to do, he will do. Right?
Without our help.
And then the other thing is he'll never lead us astray. He'll never lead us down a path that we shouldn't go down like Rebecca did with Jacob. He always seeks to lead us along paths, Psalm 23:3, along the right paths for his name's sake. Okay? So, what other thoughts, questions, anything you guys want to bring out or point out from this lesson?
Also, you know, what's the line between favorite versus preference?
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's kind of a dilemma, because we prefer to come to this church. You know, we prefer to be in this class, be around these folks. I mean,
Yeah, and like I said, I think there's nothing wrong with preference. You know what I mean? I think that's normal. That's natural. But I think what we have to be, where we got to be careful, and it's hard. It's a great question, Steve. Because I think it's something we have to ask ourselves all the time, right? Am I showing favoritism? Or, you know what I mean? So where would that line be just even within this class?
I think it's a difference in acceptance. If you read a couple of chapters later, Jacob and Esau meet again, and Jacob sees, or Esau sees everything that Jacob has, and he says, I don't need it, I have enough.
Right.
Is what he says. His brother's willing to give him some things, and he says, well, no, I have enough. He would have preferred to have more. But he saw the blessing that he had, and he accepted it.
Yeah, and it's and that's we're going to get into that next week. We're going to see that restoration happen between Jacob and Esau, which is it's clearly a God thing. You know what I mean? We're going to see it's a God thing, right? Time is going to help. You know what I mean? And the separation, God's going to bring them back together. And yeah, it's going to get to be a good story, kind of. You know what I mean? We're just in the middle of it where it's just not very good. You know what I mean? And unfortunately, this relationship, even though the brothers kind of heal up their relationship, it's still going to be a strained relationship moving forward between these two groups of people for really till today. It's still going on. But I think you know, I think as far as not showing favoritism and preference, you know, how open are we to new people? You know what I mean? Are we going out of our way to make people feel comfortable, to be warm and to be inviting? I love what Pastor Paul is doing right now with, I don't know the right term for it. What's the word for it that he's using on people welcoming everybody? And what's the what?
The greeters.
Yeah, the greeters welcome. He's got a better word for it, though. What is it? Hospitality. Yes, thank you. Hospitality. You know what I mean? Showing that toward people. And I think we just, you know, you kind of gotta push yourself out of those comfort zones sometimes. You know what I mean? And even in my 3 kids, you know, I gotta push. I gotta make sure that I'm giving them equal
So Steve, I think
attention, even if it's not. They don't all need the same thing from me. You know what I mean? My daughter's just moved over the weekend, so she's been super needy. You know, but they bought a new house and they've moved, and so you know what I mean. It's required a lot of attention. You know. So you just got to make sure you're meeting the needs of, you know what I mean, of all of our kids, or people within our church, or people in our community group, people outside of our community group. And I think and we've got to guard against this, even in this group, because we're a big group, right? And it's okay that some of you are really close. You got close friendships, you got close relationships, and that's okay. That's good, but just make sure that we're investing in everybody. You know what I mean? At some level. Yes, brother.
If I could throw an African perspective in, this partiality thing gets into tribalism too.
Yeah.
And you can all be brown or white, and you can still hate each other, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just racism in another form, but, Mary Lou and I had so many people who would, I can't go in his house, he's a different tribe.
Right.
I can't go witness to him, he's a different tribe. Well, yeah, you can. Come go with me. No. No.
Sure. It's just something we got to guard against.
Yeah, and they caught it from their mom and dad.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what we see even in this story,
Same thing.
right? A lot of this starts with mom and dad.
Yeah.
And it's something they've been taught from the time they're little bitty. And, yeah.
Challenging.
Challenging, for sure. For sure. Yeah.
We kind of have a situation in our family where one of our great nieces, her mother passed away, but her grandmother focused on her mom, but now she's focusing all her attention on her granddaughter. Well, her granddaughter told her she didn't want to be the favorite. And she says, she said, put your attention on the other kids, on your other grandkids too. She said, I don't want to be the favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think there's even that aspect of it, if, we could guard against it that way too. You know what I mean? If you are seeing that you're getting all of somebody's attention, whether that be in a family relationship, in a group relationship or church relationship, just look for those opportunities to invest in people, build relationships with people that are maybe outside of your preference. A good way to put it, maybe. So for sure. All right, guys. Well, next week we will go ahead and we will go forward to Genesis chapter 27, and or no, not 27. I gotta get to 33, and we're gonna see Jacob and Esau reunited after years of separation, and it'll be a much more positive lesson to look at. Thank you, guys. Hope you guys have a great day, great week, and we'll see you again next week.